Hey everybody, it is Mike, 55 years young. Welcome to this new video on cancer. I did a video recently with Dr. Peter Rogers. There's a whole playlist on his videos, so check those out here on the channel. But he was the only one who was talking about this new way of looking at cancer and how it develops and what we can do to prevent it and possibly reverse it. Except I just saw this guy in my newsfeed. He's got over 1 million subscribers, like 1.4 million, and he is kind of along the same lines. He's not necessarily plant-based or vegan. I have no idea if he is. I don't think he is, but he's about health optimization, and this is making it into the mainstream. It's exciting, so let's get right into this. I'm skipping over the history, and I'll link the video below so you can watch it, but we're going to get into what he thinks now, what the current thinking is since, I think, the 2010s.
Which is the evolutionary paradigm of cancer. And the idea is that we're once again trying to go one step deeper into trying to understand what cancer is. That is, we're not saying that there's no genetic mutations. Yes, there are. But what's driving these accumulated genetic mutations that is causing the growth that is causing all of these
That's what
things?
I want to hear.
That's the real question, because as we go deeper and deeper, we're understanding more and more. We know the causes of cancer, a lot of the causes of cancer.
What the
we're trying to figure out the mechanism. And we know there's genetic mutations, but this idea that they're random was completely not correct. There's something that's behind it. And what is it that's behind it? In this...
Right, so that's what the thinking was up till recently, is that it's random mutations. But he's saying it's not. Now, why?
The whole paradigm sort of started in the sort of late 2000s, when 2007, the National Cancer Institute started to think, wow, we're not getting anywhere. Like, we're starting to see that this somatic mutation theory, this genetic paradigm is going nowhere. So they funded a number of thinkers.
And he also said that in order for that theory to work, they would have to develop like 100,000 drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, to combat each variation, which would be a giant payday for the pharmaceutical companies. But like Dr. Peter Rogers talks about mitochondrial dysfunction. And what happens when your mitochondria are not functioning properly? You develop noncommunicable disease. And you'll hear from this guy that basically what he's going to tell you is why, from a regular, conventional medical point of view or research point of view, why festering underlying disease is how cancer develops in humans.
Including Paul Davies, who's actually not an oncologist. He's an astrophysicist, astrobiologist, actually. And he thinks about life on other worlds and so on. And they said, well, we need different people to think about this cancer problem, and we want you to think about it. Here's some money. Please help us. So he sort of says that, well, he was able to break free of a lot of the sort of biases of his predecessors because he had no background in cancer. So he asked the stupid questions that nobody else wanted to ask.
That's good.
Which is,
great.
What is cancer and why does it exist? And of course, that is a very good question, because cancer is completely baffling.
Don't have any assumptions.
It is not like anything else we know. It comes from our own cells. That is, if somebody develops breast cancer...
Keep in mind, it's one of the biggest diseases affecting all people, especially in the United States. It's a huge, huge, massive problem.
It develops from their own normal breast cancer. So each cancerous cell sort of develops independently because person A and person B have nothing to do with each other, and yet they develop the same disease. So what is it, and why does it exist? The other thing that he noted is that cancer is not a human disease. It's actually as old as life itself. If you go back in evolutionary time, you can see that cancer exists in virtually all multicelled life forms. So even the Hydra, so this is a picture of Hydra. It's one of these microscopic animals that you study in high school under the microscope. You know, you put a drop of water.
All right, what I learned from Dr. Rogers is similar to what he's saying right now. It is that basically, if your body can't use the way it's evolved, the most efficient method to produce energy, you know, through your mitochondria, it will go backwards in time and use a very inefficient method but yet still a method to produce energy because your whole system's so clogged up with disease, it won't let it do the preferred, so it goes to the backup method. And guess what that backup method is called? Cancer.
Water, they found cancers. They found tumors in these hydra cells. So even the very most primitive multicelled animals develop cancer. Not only that, but almost every single cell type in the human body can become cancer. And how does that work? Because a liver cell has nothing much in common with a blood cell or
Right.
a
It can be under
testicular
stress,
cell
though,
or
because of
whatever.
disease.
So if you're studying human cancers, it's not that useful if you're trying to understand cancer if cancer predates humanity itself. So he went back and started to think about how did life on Earth evolve and where did cancer fit into this whole story? So if we go back to how life on Earth develops, we develop, through a process of evolution. There's prokaryotic cells, which are single-celled organisms and very basic. And then they became eukaryotic cells, which are still single-celled organisms, but much more organized. So you start to see the plasma membrane, the endoplasmic reticulum, and so on. And that was a huge jump forward in terms of complexity because, the nucleus and these specialized Golgi apparatus and stuff, that was a huge step forward. Mm-hmm. And the next major step was really the jump to multicellularity. So when you consider single-celled organisms compared to multicelled organisms, there's a massive difference between the two. And the most basic difference is that single-celled organisms are always going to compete with other ones. So you have a bunch of bacteria, for example, they all compete with each other. They will kill each other. That is how fungi developed, penicillin to kill those other single-celled organisms. So they won't want to kill each other. They're competing with each other. When they start to aggregate into multicelled organisms, there was a massive change in the cellular priority because now you're trying to cooperate with other cells. So you organize the cell into bunches of cells, which organize into organs, which organizes into the sort of multicelled organism. But there's a very big difference because you don't want these cells to go around killing each other. No. So as we evolved, we had to develop additional instructions that went on top of the original instructions. So the original instructions is sort of survive at all costs, kill everybody,
survival mode. Yep.
You had to put additional instructions to say, don't kill everybody, don't
go into thrive mode now.
Cooperate.
That's what it is. Survive to thrive.
And one of the things that you see the difference between single-celled organisms and multi-celled organisms is that their growth of single-celled organisms is basically uncontrolled. They just grow. So if you look at bacteria in a petri dish, for example, they just grow and grow and grow and grow. And they will keep growing until there's nothing left to eat. That's the only thing that limits them. They won't stop.
They grow out of control.
A single-celled organism doesn't do that. A multi-celled organism doesn't do that because growth is very, very tightly controlled. You don't want your liver just growing and growing and growing until it shoves your lung, up your nose. It's not what you want to do. You want to grow to a certain point, then you need to stop growing. And it's not limited by resource availability. It's largely independent. It's going to grow no matter what. Even if you eat a lot, your liver is only going to grow to a certain size. It's not going to become the size of a boulder, for example. So single-celled organisms grow. Single-celled organisms are also immortal. So you take a bacteria, you can keep growing that bacteria.
If that's cancer.
It will keep growing as long as you keep putting stuff in, which is, again, different from the multicelled organism, which is controlled by the telomeres, of course, and that's the Hayflick limit. So you take a cell, a normal cell, you try and grow it. Each time it reproduces, the telomere shortens, and then you reach this Hayflick limit where you cannot grow anymore. So single cell immortal, multi-cell immortal. We know that single-celled organisms also grow a lot, move a lot. So they have all these different ways. Even though they don't have legs, they have all these different ways of getting around because it's to their advantage to be able to move. So a bacteria, for example, even if it can't move, it'll go into a spore and it'll get blown by the wind or it'll get picked up by something else and get moved around because there's always a chance that there's more available nutrients elsewhere. They know that if they stay in the same area, they're just going to lose all their resources. Whereas
Hmm.
multicelled organisms have multiple ways of sticking them in place.
Yep.
So you want these
They're not
adhesion
panicking.
molecules to stick all the cells so that your liver doesn't move around. And the fourth major difference between single-celled organisms and multi-celled organisms is that single-celled organisms use fermentation. That is, they take glucose and they produce lactic acid, whereas multi-celled organisms use oxidative phosphorylation. And this is, of course,
Hmm.
the Warburg effect.
Yep.
So if you look at the comparison of cells within a multi-celled organism, compared to single-celled organisms and compare them to cancer cells, what you can see is that cancer cells and single-celled organisms are practically identical. That is, the
Hmm.
priority for this cancer
Makes
cell
sense.
is the cancerous cell itself. It's every man for himself, just like the single-celled organisms. Whereas for the multi-celled organisms, your liver, for
Chaos.
example, will die off if it needs to, because it doesn't want to take
Multi-cell
over or
organized.
take over resources. Everything is geared towards
Disciplined.
survival of the organism, not survival of the cell.
Operating
But
from a
cancer
plan.
cells are not like that. They want
Yep.
to compete, same as the single cell, whereas the other one wants to cooperate. These are the sort of hallmarks of cancer: growth, immortality, movement, and glycolysis. You can see that there's a stark difference between the multi-celled organisms, where they don't do this, and single-celled organisms and cancers that do.
Okay, I would say the way he's explaining it and the way Dr. Rogers has explained things, you can clearly see that cancer is like the red flags have been going off for a while with you, aka disease, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed, because you may not have noticed it, even in children. Okay, and now it's a crisis mode. We're trying to survive this body some way because you're shutting down due to your bad habits that are creating non-communicable disease. And you can see that clearly two different ways of approaching this. One is chaotic, do anything, survive at all costs, take everything over. That's cancer. And then the other one was, be disciplined, have a plan. We have goals. That's normal, multicellular. But if you don't regulate your life with the proper habits, which are the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, the 6 pillars of healthy vegan food, learn more at healthyveganfood.info, then you won't be able to stay in that zone, the multicellular. You won't be able to avoid cancer, most likely, because we don't know where the cutoff. That's what he'll say. I know that no one knows what the cutoff between illness and sickness is. No one knows. So no one knows what the cutoff between multicellular and cancer is. But you know it when you're there, when it's too late. So there should be motivation to do the best you can. And by the way, we have health optimization travel events. Go to healthoptimizationtravel.org to learn more, where we talk, everything's done through the framework of the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine and the 6 pillars of healthy vegan food to help prevent all these bad situations.
Do this. So cancer cells actually behave very much like single-celled organisms. But
Mm-hmm.
you can actually go much deeper. There's actually a number more ways that they are alike. Despecialization, so cancer cells start to be able to grow themselves and do all kinds of other things. They're autonomous, they do their own thing. They have host destruction, so just like a bacteria will destroy the tissue around it,
That's
so will
bad.
cancer cells.
Bad.
You see
You
this
don't want that.
exponential growth, so cancer cells will just keep growing
Super
and
bad.
growing. It will invade into new territories, whereas normal cells will never do that. So if you have a
Right.
liver cell, it doesn't
They have
invade
discipline. They have
through the lung
structure.
sort of
They have
thing.
a
And whereas
plan. They have
cancer liver cells,
goals.
of course, do that. They'll compete with resources, and they have
Cancer's
genomic
chaos.
instability. That is, they will mutate and they will change, just like single-celled organisms. If you think about it, the disease of cancer and the infectious diseases are very, very similar. That is, in no other conditions do you face the same problem with resistance. So single-celled organisms, of course, you give antibiotics, they develop resistance. You don't get that, for example, with a kidney stone. You
No.
blast it, it doesn't start resisting it. You'll get new
Still a
kidney stones, but
non-communicable disease.
you don't
Don't get
get
it.
the
Have
same
good
kidney
habits.
stone all of a sudden resistant to that. It just doesn't happen. Whereas cancer does the same thing. You treat it with radiation or you treat it with chemotherapy. When it comes back, it's now resistant to that treatment. You can't use that same treatment again. We don't have that in virtually any other diseases, because these are the same thing. These cancer cells and these single-celled organisms behave exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm.
They invade tissue, right? You don't if you have kidney disease, it's not like it starts invading into the pancreas. They metastasize. You have metastatic infections and metastatic cancers. You don't get metastatic kidney stones. You get the resistance, you get genetic mutations, the cells evolve. So in infections, of course, you
Bad.
get new,
Hmm.
the evolution and the resistance.
Don't want
And
that for
cancer
anybody.
cells evolve too. So if you take somebody who's been treated several times and you check their genome against the original cancer, it's completely different. And they have secretions. That is, they will secrete things and get them. So the question is, how did these two diseases, why are they so similar? Like, how did it get to that stage? And the only thing sort of powerful enough in biology to do this is evolution. So this is the sort of idea that came through, is this behind this evolutionary paradigm, is that you started out, all the cells within our body started out originally with a unicellular genome, because we all evolved from single-celled organisms.
Mm-hmm.
As we became multi-celled organisms, we added all these genes, like for immortality, right? We want to be mortal. We want to limit growth. We want to limit movement. We want to do the more. So, but you didn't get rid of the original programming. You
The
had all
backup
the
programming.
original playbook underneath, and you just added stuff on top so that you could get.
It's kind of like being backwards compatible. And I guess, it's an emergency level, that old programming, but we just got to be smarter as humans to not fester, not allow that non-communicable disease to fester, to have the right habits. So if this is making sense for you, support what we do at aPlantBasedDiet.org. Go to our calendar, plantbasedevents.info. You'll see what we're doing.
Hey, stop growing. Hey, stop living so long. But the underlying sort of core was still always there. And what the idea is, that the kernel of cancer exists in every single one of our cells. And
Right.
as you expose these
Wow.
cells to damage, so you damage the area that's controlling the growth, all of a sudden you have
You're
unlimited growth.
abusing
You
it. Yeah.
damage the area that's controlling immortality. All of a sudden you get.
Yeah, I've been saying this to people. I call it abuse. When you're doing things that harm your body, it's self-abuse. And this makes perfect sense with his description here about how cancer works, how the real understanding finally is coming to light, that it's from all the self-abuse, from all the things, because we're smart enough to not abuse ourselves. We're definitely smart enough. I know it's hard, and that's why we have our events. Like I said, plantbasedevents.info. Get some support, get some positive peer pressure. People who don't want to harm themselves, who don't want to get cancer.
Immortality. So that is the kernel of cancer, this unicellular ancestor, is already preformed.
Also, I don't think he says it here, but I do believe the body to be regenerative. And by the way, if you have any of these symptoms, definitely get some medical advice from a doctor board certified in lifestyle medicine. That's who you want, a doctor that's board certified in lifestyle medicine. Okay. But my belief is that the body is regenerative, but you must provide the right conditions. If you don't provide the right conditions, if you're constantly self-abusing through your chosen habits, through the food especially, this is what you end up with. This is what this guy is saying, and this all makes sense. And I'm so thankful that the traditional, or the base medical community is finally catching on to this.
Every single cell of our body, and really of every single cell in all multicelled animals. And that explains a huge amount of the behavior of cancer. That is, how does cancer exist in every animal, multicelled animal that we know? Because that's how we evolved.
It was
That's
required
from
for
evolution.
life. Yeah.
How is it that every single type of cell in our body?
And so much of this is about health span and longevity. You wonder why the difference between someone that is chronically ill all the time, which is most people now, and dies early, which is most people, and someone who lives to 150. That's my book. Learn more at liveto150.org. What? live to150.org. It's free, totally free. It's just because of your chosen habits. You choose to thrive. You choose to do the best that you can. You choose to make sure you do not harm yourself. You do not eat food that harms your health. You don't eat, we call it health-harming food. And you're seeing here that it directly affects cancer. Directly. That's what this guy is saying.
Can become cancerous. Well, it's because we all have that kernel of cancer that comes in. It explains how these cancer cells can grow and metastasize and develop resistance, and it explains how cancers look the same. So this is a very
You would
interesting
know,
thing,
not
because
me.
you can take a patient with breast cancer in 1920 in the United States and compare it with somebody who lives in Asia or Africa in 2020. So 100 years apart, different races, different continents, and yet the breast cancer will look exactly the same. But they've evolved completely independently of each other. How is that possible? How is it that they look the same?
It's the base
And it's
programming.
because
The old
it's this
survival
sort
mode.
of preformed kernel of cancer that is now expressing itself through this genetic damage. And it's as we
keep in
take
mind,
out these sort of additional pieces that we
your body doesn't want to do that. It only reverts to that after all the self-abuse, after all the warning signs. Like I say, non-communicable disease is a good thing because it's your body expressing that something's wrong and asking you to change it. It will never stop. I know that right now the current paradigm is that you take pharmaceutical drugs to suppress the symptoms. You do procedures and surgeries to suppress the symptoms or temporarily eliminate them. It doesn't solve the problem, though. None of that stuff does. The cancer will show up when it realizes that you cross that line and we don't know where that is, and that you've given up as an individual. That's when it creeps in. So don't even allow that to be possible. Do the best that you can.
expose this. So this is not a forward evolution. It's actually an evolution backwards in time.
Yeah.
That is, we're not getting more evolved. We're going backwards into a more primitive state.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, in fact, exactly how the pathologists describe cancer. They're primitive cells. They're de-differentiated cells. Anaplastic, the word means back. Ana means back, and places means formation. It's all describing a backwards evolution towards a more primitive state. And that's why we all look alike, which is called an atavism. It's an evolution backwards, not to become more evolved, to become less evolved, to become more survivable, because that's the sort of original survivable sort of wild animal ancestor that we have. And the idea is that as we sort of fall backwards into this unicellular state, lung tissue and liver tissue, for example, start to look more and more alike because they're more similar. And that's how they can grow in each other's environments much more easily. And so it really explains a huge amount. The idea is that so cancer cells, they behave exactly like single-celled organisms. It explains why genetic mutations are not random, but they should target primarily the state from unicellular genes to multicellular genes, because the origin of the cancer really lies in that jump from single-celled organism to multicellularity. So can we find evidence that that is actually what's happening here? So in fact, this is exactly what they're starting to find. So if you look at the unicellular genes, and for most of history we're single-celled animals, and then you have this sort of multi-celled gene, this overlap period is where you find cancer. So this is from 2017, and they look at all the mutations of cancer. Instead of saying, well, which gene is mutated, what they did was they asked the question, is these genes, are they newer genes or older genes?
This brings up the concept of epigenetics, and I talk about that. That's one of the chapters of my book, Live to 150. It's on epigenetics. It's the idea that you can change the expression of your genes, the way they express, either high quality or cancer, like he's saying, okay, by the inputs It's as simple as that. It's the habits. You have the ability to do that. You have the ability by quality inputs, quality food, 6 pillars of healthy vegan food, quality habits, 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, that your genes will express super high quality and you will probably never develop cancer. But if you don't adhere to those, it's only a matter of time. And when you cross that unknown threshold and you start to have first, probably chronic disease, and then second, cancer, when everything's just shutting down and going into survival mode, like it wants your body to survive at all costs. And that's what cancer is. So cancer is not actually a bad thing either. And I do believe you can probably reverse it. Probably, but you have to be so good with your habits. You have to have an open mind and be willing to do that. So if you're open-minded, come join us. Like I said, check our calendar out at plantbasedevents.info.
So they divided them into 16 phylostrata, which is to say that here's our most ancient genes, unicellular genes. And these are more recent genes, evolutionarily speaking. These are the more recent genes where not which genes are mutated, but from what era are they mutated. And what you see, of course, is that they're all coming in from the unicellular portion, this part where it jumps to multicellularity. All the sort of recent genes, that's not where you're finding all the damage. You're finding all the damage, all the mutations, just in this transition. This is the same thing. These are the genes in millions of years. And these are all human genes, overmutated and undermutated genes. And you see they mostly fall in line with what you expect, except right here. The most ancient genes are the ones that are targeted in cancer development. Yeah. It's not that, it's not all the recent stuff, it's the old stuff because it goes way back. And again, this is the same things showing sort of all cancer genes. Where is it that you find?
He's not getting into mitochondrial function or dysfunction, but that's at the root of what's going on. The reason why the switch is taking place is because of your mitochondria being inhibited. So they have to revert to the old original programming. So I'm just adding this in so you understand. Like I said, I'm linking that Dr. Rogers video where I talked to him about cancer. That is linked down below so you can get more detail on that part of it, because Jason Fung does not discuss that here.
Find the mutations, and there's 2 spots sort of right here, very, very ancient genes, the most ancient genes, and right here, which is this transition from sort of single-celled organisms to multicellular organisms. Right there is where you find the gene mutations. Same thing here, 2016 from another Nature Communications. So again, most genes that are multicellular, they sort of fall within where you expect. But this part right here is where you find all the genes of cancer. Right here, from when you're going from a single-celled protozoan to multi-celled organisms all the way up to humans. So it's really describing an evolutionary process in this transition state. And the question is why? Why is it reverting to this unicellular state? It's an extraordinary complex thing to go from a sort of multi-celled organism back to a single-celled organism. So why is it going to do that? And the answer really is evolution. It's not just randomly developing into cancer. It's evolving back towards its sort of ancestor. And it requires 3 things. One is genetic heterogeneity, which we know it has. It requires time. So it's a chronic process. And it requires a selection pressure, right? Just like this is the Darwin's finches. So he said, well, the environment says that, hey, if there's a lot of nuts, you get these thicker beaks because that's what's favored. The birds where there's a lot of fruit get these thinner beaks. So it's the selection pressure. What is the selection pressure in this case? And it's probably sublethal injury. So if you look at chronicity,
sublethal injury.
What's important, of course, is that
sublethal injury, he's talking about probably mitochondria dysfunction. He's talking about chronic illness, noncommunicable disease, which is 90% of all medical costs in the US today. This is why cancer is rampant, because the industry needs to change its approach, and lifestyle medicine has. That's why we say, see a board certified lifestyle medicine doctor. But the rest of it hasn't. They're just going to suppress your injuries and then cancer will be right there lurking in the background and eventually jump on you.
If it's an evolutionary process, it's going to take time. So acute injuries are not going to do it. But
Right,
chronic
like you
injuries
cut
are
your
going to do
finger.
it because it's going to give it the time it needs. So you can look
Fester.
at
It has to
hepatitis
fester.
A, for example, and hepatitis E. Severe liver disease, but acute, not chronic, and doesn't cause cancer. Hepatitis B and C, absolutely. You get acute gastritis, doesn't cause cancer, but you get chronic gastritis, all of a sudden you get cancer. Same thing with inflammatory colitis versus a chronic ulcerative colitis. You get a burn, you don't get that much cancer, but chronic sun exposure, like sunburns, you get cancer.
Sunburns. Makes
Radiation was
sense.
the same. So acute radiation. They worried about Hiroshima, the bomb, when people were exposed to
But this
massive
is interesting.
levels of radiation. And they worried that people would get cancer. Turns out they didn't really. This was a study of the Hiroshima
Eye-opening.
and Nagasaki survivor studies. And this is the sort of excess amount of cancer that they saw. So the blue is how much they expected to see. The white is how much they actually saw. So you see maybe 5% extra. But you're talking about massive levels of radiation exposure.
Right.
But the key was
You
that it
think
was
more.
a
You think
single
more.
acute event. It was not a chronic event.
Right. There you go.
And that's why you didn't see the
That's
cancer,
the key.
which was a great thing in that case. But you need it to be chronic. And the single...
But think again, the state of emergency we're in, especially in the United States with our health. Not 90% of all healthcare costs in the US are going for non-communicable diseases, chronic lifestyle illnesses. What's next? The next level of lifestyle chronic illness, which is cancer. That's why cancer is prolific now. It seems like it's everywhere.
Sort of overriding hallmark of these organisms is survival, right? It's survival. It's sort of like the survivalist in the woods, right? He's got to be self-sufficient. He's moving around. He's, always trying to grow his land. He's going to compete with other people trying to invade on him. That's what the unicellular organism is. It's like the survivalist, right? And it's focused on its own survival, not the organism's survival. So the idea is that the selection pressure doesn't come from...
Its function is its organism's survival. So it's a very selfish method of surviving, whereas the multicellular is cooperative. You might want to look at cancer like that. It's a very selfish thing. I'm just thinking out loud as I'm watching this, and it all makes sense to me. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.
Sort of minimal injury, because if you have a little bit of injury, you're just going to repair it. If you have massive injury, the cell is just going to die. But it's in this sort of in-between state where you have chronic sublethal cellular injury, where you get this breakdown like of law and order. You get this anarchy. And the cells have to adapt because they've been injured. So if they don't adapt, they're going to die. And they don't want to die. So how are they going to become more survivable?
Well,
they're going to start competing with each other. And they're going to start shedding off these more recent sort of instructions to cooperate with each other. And they're going to sort of look out for themselves. That is, they're going to revert back to that single-celled organism mindset. And they do this by getting rid of all of those excess baggage. That is the underlying sort of playbook of the single-celled organism is now coming out. And it's just like anarchy. Whenever you have a breakdown of law and order, there's looting, every man for himself, every woman for himself. You start to, form bands and kill each other and that kind of thing. So it's the exact same thing, but it needs to be chronic, and it's this sublethal injury. And that really explains a lot. So as you evolve into multicellularity, what you see is that the tumor is this damage to these other things. The survivalist core sort of comes out because the handbook that was there from the unicellular organism already is there and just waiting to come out. It's not a random genetic process, but it's a targeted evolutionary change back towards single-celled life. And the interesting thing about it is that we already know that cancers undergo an evolutionary process. So this is an evolutionary tree. This is called branch chain evolution. And you see, bacteria branch off here, and, animals and fungi branch off here. We can do exactly the same thing with cancers. So they've done this. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine, 2012. They took a bunch of sites. They sampled this M1 tumor, M2 tumor, and they sampled all these metastases, and they basically did exactly the same thing. You can follow exactly how this tumor evolved. So you go from a normal tissue, and then you get these mutations, then you split off and you get these mutations, these mutations, these mutations. And this is how you get all of these different heterogenetic things. But what's driving the mutation in the first place is this sort of trying to become increasingly survivable. So in this case, the way we approach medicine, the cancer, is that we have to say, well, what is this? It's chronic sublethal cellular damage. The cellular response is an evolution back to.
Keep in mind, the medical industry does not approach it in this way right now. Hopefully a lifestyle medicine doctor does, although it had to be an oncologist. I think it's going to be hard to find a lifestyle medicine board certified oncologist, but I would say look for one, find one. Please, your life depends on it.
Towards this sort of survivalist single-celled organisms, and therefore all sources of chronic sublethal cell injury are now potentially carcinogenic, which is actually something we already knew. So these processes are not necessarily mutagenic. That is, they don't necessarily cause genetic mutations. Some of them do for sure, but all you need is the chronic sublethal cellular injury to activate this evolutionary process. So even normal things like Barrett's esophagus is normal stomach acid, but in the wrong place, it causes this chronic subcellular injury. But the stomach acid itself is not mutagenic. Same thing with inflammatory bowel disease. There's nothing mutagenic. It's not like ionizing radiation.
Keep in mind, like he's talking about GERD, acid reflux. I know my wife, Denise, has problems with that. I've encouraged her to quit anything and everything that makes her react. And that you can feel the stomach acid coming out because of what he just said, because of what Jason just said, which is you don't know when it's going to turn into cancer. And it will if it's festering, if it's chronic, if it's underlying, if that stress, that constant stress is there. But you can do something about it. That's the optimistic thing here. That's the hope. You can, but you have to have an open mind. I'm sorry to tell you, but you probably already know, that most people don't have an open mind. And I explain this to people, and they just completely ignore me. They just refuse to listen. They refuse to do anything, even though what he says here, I truly believe, is the truth. It is.
Is chronic inflammation. Anything that causes chronic inflammatory disease, any type of cirrhosis. So even fatty liver disease, which is, excessive fat in the liver, there's nothing mutagenic about the whole thing. And yet, any cirrhosis is going to increase the risk of hepatocellular carcinoma because it's this chronic sublethal damage. That's what's happening. And over time, so there's the chronicity, it's activating evolutionary processes.
So it's not just one time you're going to prevent cancer or reverse cancer. It's all the time. It's not just one and done. You have to make this your habits, your lifestyle. I talk about that in my book, Live to 150, liveto150.org.
Sunburns, the same thing. Radiation. So the exact same thing that we treat cancers with is carcinogenic because you're causing chronic damage, chronic inflammation.
And it's worse than just getting an x-ray at the dentist because that's just one time, acute, like he said, and then you're gone. But with the treatment for the cancer, the chemotherapy, you are creating it. It's chronic. It's so bad. It's like a downward spiral once you get cancer. And I even read some of the things that were said online about these esophageal cancers that he referenced here. And a lot of them, I think if they catch it at a normal range, because usually they don't catch it till it's really progressed, you only have a 20% survival rate after 5 years. This is so important.
Chronic damage. So the same thing with chemotherapy. The very drug that you're using to treat cancer causes cancer. And we've, of course, known that forever. These are called secondary tumors. You get that with radiation, you get that with chemotherapies. We know.
All right, you may wonder and say, Mike, hey, okay, this all makes sense. Why didn't people figure this out before? It's because of money. How much money do you think they make off these treatments, off the drugs and pharmaceuticals? And how much money do you think they make if someone just changes their habits and doesn't show up in the medical facility anymore? There is a massive difference there, and this is why they haven't figured it out till now. And only some people know it now. So spread this word. Share this video, please.
Very well. Same thing with transplant medications. Some of them definitely lead to that. So this is the idea. This is this evolutionary paradigm that we've now moved towards, which really explains a lot of the things that the somatic mutation theory never could. That is, all of these questions like, why do all these things that don't cause gene damage cause cancer? Why does cancers look the same? Why do you have so many cancers? Why do all animals get cancer? Why do all cells get cancer? So none of that could be explained. But as we move towards this sort of chronic sublethal cellular damage, which really all of them do. So infections do the same thing, chronic infections and chemicals and smoke and all of that.
Those things
it causes this reversion to unicellular existence because that's our sort of evolution.
And the reason why this is happening is because we have the diet of kings and queens. We all want the lifestyles of kings and queens. They were all sick. They were all chronically ill. They don't want to move. They want everyone else to do stuff for them. They have overnutrition, not undernutrition. And of course, super high fat, percentage of calories and fat, super high sodium. And there you have it. It explains everything. Let me know in the comments if this makes sense to you.
Evolutionary ancestor, which is going to cause targeted genetic mutations because it's an evolutionary process towards cancer, which is just that expression of the single cell organisms, which then manifests as the hallmarks of cancer. That is, these things grow, they're immortal, they move around, and they use the Warburg effect. So that's the answer that we're coming up with, is that all of them are genetically diverse, but they look identical at the pathological.
All right, let's stop it here. I'll link his video below. I'll link Dr. Rogers' video below. And I'm so happy that this is apparently getting into the mainstream. And what does it come back to? It comes back to what we've been saying all along. Do not eat health-harming foods. And most vegan and plant-based foods are health-harming. It's got to meet the 6 pillars of healthy vegan food to be aligned with nature so that you can use that multicellular pathway, which is health, the real wealth. When you go to that single cell, it's because you've harmed yourself. It's because all you care about above everything else is your taste buds. That's the true answer here, okay? And if you're willing to sacrifice your taste buds, the rest of your body will celebrate. And if you're not, now you know how it works. It's not a mystery anymore. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.